Okay. Think we're back up. Sorry about that. Working through some technical difficulty.
Hey man, y'all gotta bear with Christian,
Think
man.
we're
He's
back up.
still
Sorry about that. Yep.
it's an echo.
Okay,
Yeah.
there we go. I think we got it. Yeah, man, I'm not the guy you call for IT support, that's for sure.
Oh man. Yeah, I don't know where we left off. Regardless, man, Memphis is dope. And I don't know. I'm very interested to see how they play. Um, maybe say like out of the first round, maybe playing more teams that have like upper end superstar talents, But yeah, I mean they play really well together, and I think they're fun to watch, and there's no accident. It's clear that they're as good as they are.
I really like that Chicago Bulls comp because the Grizzlies just they own the paint, like with all those big guys that they have, Steven Adams, Jaren Jackson Jr., guys a defensive player of the year candidate, and then Brandon Clark off the bench who is really freaking good. Brandon Clark was
Yeah,
10 for 10 in that game last night, by the way.
man, he owns the Pelicans, bro.
Dude, he's so good. I mean, look, I'm wrong all the time, but I like loved Brandon Clark coming into that draft, and I was like, I just don't understand how this guy is falling to 21 like this. There's just no way this guy is not good. But
Right.
I love that. I love that Bulls comp, man. And you're right. Like they do kind of give off those vibes, but like they're just deeper 1 through 15. Like I mean, just absurdly deep. I think the record without Ja this season was something like 20-4. And I hate when people are like, "Oh, they're a better team without Ja." It's like,
No, they're not.
okay, like yeah, I guess if you're just looking at the regular season winning percentage, but like, no, they're not better without Ja. Like, I mean, they have no shot of like going far in the playoffs without Ja. Like, let's stop that. But no, man, they're just an unbelievable team. Like if you just look at the profile, fourth in offense, fifth in defense, first in fast break points, first in points in the paint, first in second chance points, first in percentage of possessions in transition. Um, they're just unbelievable, man. Like they're like electric on the break. Like I'm scared of them on the break. And I think like if you're a Grizz doubter, you look at all right, 22nd and half court offense, like can they score when the game slows down? And I think that is a concern to some degree, but also they have Ja, like they have Desmond Bain, guy who gets buckets off the dribble, like dead eye shooter. So I don't know. That just doesn't worry me that much, I would say.
No, I mean, I think that what's going to be interesting is, when teams, when you play like when they play longer teams that want to kind of push everything that Memphis wants to do further out, and maybe you force Ja to become more of a shooter, and you live or die by that versus him consistently getting into the lane, dicing people up. Um, it's going to be interesting how they respond to that. But that's the thing. I mean, when you have as many people, when you have as many guys that work well together, they don't have to overcompensate. That just them doing their role and what they're good at makes them elite. And that's hard to stop because and then on top of just how many people that they have that are comfortable with the basketball in their hands that can create off the dribble. Dylan Brooks can create off the dribble and in spurts off of closeouts. Same with Desmond Bain, Tyus Jones, Jaren Jackson Jr. I mean, you Brandon Clark. I mean, you have guards, you have wings, and you have big men, and a bunch of them that can do so many different things that it's just hard to game plan for. Um, and nobody really seems to overstep. Nobody really tries to. There's not a lot of hero ball being played. They know that it's Ja's team, and they allow it. They'll live or die by that. So I mean, what they put together over this past 3 years and in such and making some of the changes that they made and nailing the draft and nailing some of the other acquisitions, making Steven Adams, look be really appreciated and not wearing them down in the process. I mean, they've done this the right way.
Yeah, I love what he had a tweet a couple weeks ago that was like somebody was tweeting him like, "Oh, the Grizzlies are like 18-4 without you," and he's basically like, "So I don't care," like
Right.
they're all like pulling in the same direction, I mean, you can definitely tell. I had a front office person tell me basically that Memphis's front office has done a really good job of not overthinking picks, and I
Yeah,
like that a lot. And I think that's true. Like if you just look at the draft history, I mean, obviously Ja too. Like that was kind of a no brainer, and I mean, I don't think you got to give them a ton of credit for that. I guess like I know the Pelicans kind of, they tried their best to like get in there and get Ja, but I mean, I think
yeah,
that was kind of an easy one. But like Brandon Clark at 21, like that guy was, I mean, it was clear he was going to be good. And then Desmond Bain at 30, I mean, like super productive 4 year player at TCU. I mean, I don't know that many people could have anticipated like his shot making off the dribble that he's been able
yeah.
to do, this season, but they've just taken like solid players. And it was clear at the time like those guys were very solid players for their draft positions too.
So here's my worry when it comes to Memphis. Sometimes these teams that are really, really deep, or that have that amount of talent, it becomes interesting when it's playoff time, right? Because rotations shrink, right? So when you have, I mean, you say, I, they have more than 10 quality players that you could throw out there, right? So the management of that you have to make on the fly in these type of situations where guys are going to be playing 40 minutes, 38 minutes, but your thing throughout the year has been we have so many different individuals we can throw in at one time that can end up keeping our guys fresh. Well, it's going to be interesting. You know what I'm saying? But I mean, how many minutes do you give Zaire Williams, right? DeAndre Melton has been fantastic. He's improved as a shooter as well. He's going to be coming off the bench. Kyle Anderson was big for them last year. A little different this year. How many minutes do you give him? He's been in the playoffs before, dating back to his years in San Antonio. We just talked about Brandon Clark. You have Tyus Jones, the shooter. I can't think of his name. All the way down to like Xavier Tillman. Like they have a lot of dudes before you even talk about the starting lineup that I think affect them. So I'm going to be curious like how that rotation changes at all. Um, if it matters, right, for them, if they can just go in with the same kind of situation. If not, how they adjust to where you're going to be expected to play your best guys and for heavier moments every single night.
Was the shooter you were talking about John Conchar?
Him, yes, there you go. That's the guy. And
Dude,
five, you're right. Memphis has a lot of true basketball players.
that was John Conchar erasure. Come on, man.
What's
Show
your
show some
problem?
love to John. No, I'm just kidding, man. AD was saying on the broadcast he thinks that Tyus Jones is the best backup point guard in the NBA, and
Damn.
I think, yeah, I mean, I think there's like he has a case at the very least. Like I love backup point guards who are just like extremely solid decision makers.
Right.
Like I like guys like Jose Alvarado. I think is kind of this guy. Like I love those backup point guards with like 3-to-1 assist to turnover ratios, and like you can
Right.
just count on like this guy is just going to be able to run my team and get the ball where it needs to go. Monte Morris in Denver, who's been a starter this year because Jamal Murray's out, like he's a guy like that too. Great nickname, by the way, the Count of Mont assist to turnover. But I just like to not have to worry or think about my backup point guard.
Yeah, I mean, somebody who is only going to give you, he's not going to mess things up, right? Who can make positive plays, very comfortable with, and Tyus Jones is like that. Like he is very sound. He knows his game. He knows what he is and what he is, what he isn't as a player. He doesn't try to do too much. On top of the fact that he's improved throughout the years, and whether you give him 20 minutes, 15 minutes, or 25 minutes, he makes the best of them, and he doesn't hurt you. And I mean, yeah, I think that's the best the best backup point guard in basketball. Sounds a little wild. I'd have to look, but I mean, if there's anyone that is qualified to say it, it's surely AD. That's crazy. I got to think of some other backup point guards now, man. That's interesting to hear.
Yeah, I haven't like sat down and done the NBA backup point guard deep dive or anything. That's just
Oh,
kind of
I'm
out the top of my
I'm
head.
I'm doing it right now. Don't worry, I got you covered. Damn. Hold on, because I'm going through something that we can keep this going, but in the process, I'm looking here because That's interesting. Damn.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about Trey Murphy because I think he's had a pretty interesting last month.
Yeah.
He's pretty much been a mainstay in the rotation for about a month now. Like if you look at his numbers since March 9th, 9.5 points per game, 46% shooting, 45% from three on 4.2 attempts per game, 90% from the line, basically one offensive rebound, one steal a game. Um, what are your thoughts on what he's done lately and just how, I guess, Willie has kind of handled him overall this season?
So, and I don't remember if I talked about this on the last show, but I got a chance to talk recently to Trey's dad, Kenny Murphy,
Great
and
guy.
no, interesting, but no, really like a really cool, genuine, like down to earth dude, like straight shooter to be honest. But I say interesting because he was blunt about Trey. Like we talked about how, and he went on David Grubb's podcast, Hard to Paint, and talked about some of these things as well. But he talked about how earlier in the year, Trey just, in his opinion, wasn't ready. And while a lot of us were in spaces and I mean on Twitter and just on different podcasts trying to make sense of why he wasn't playing, you get to a point at the end of the year where they depend on him and he just looks like a different basketball player. Now, who knows how much that helped him? Who's to say that if he would have been playing those minutes and not been glued to the bench or putting together stints in the G League, would that have helped him? Would that have hurt him? Who really knows? But one way or another, it's happy to see him here because what we talked about in that conversation and what you could tell like was missed is that Trey. There were a lot of ways that Trey could impact the game, but it just felt like he put too much pressure on himself. And defensively, he still wasn't completely there. There was still some things that he had to put forward, and just I guess overall adapting to the NBA, adapting to what it means to be a professional and not having things handed to you. But and even that part of it is interesting because it wasn't like Trey came from Rice. He came from Rice and then Virginia, so he's had to work for everything that he got. He wasn't like this this high school prospect or anything like that. But there were like the dirty plays that we've seen him make, the dirty work plays, the rebounds, the offensive rebounds, the putbacks, the communication on defense. Like that's been to me the biggest like the best thing that's worked in his favor. Just the little plays, even if they don't add up to uh, great box scores or they don't add up to him shooting the lights out consistently or a game like that Lakers game, right? Or just the numbers you put out. It's the little things in the process that I think have helped him and that have it's the biggest difference between what you see now and what you saw in the beginning. So just that grind, him having to go through that adversity, fight back, learn from it, apply it, and then have his moment. I mean, you're proud of it because he's seems to be, man, a really good kid who comes from an amazing background, and it's one of the better, I guess, stories I think of this season.
Yeah, I'm with you that we've seen him, kind of figure out like how can I add value in ways other than just like shooting the ball, which we know he can do. Like his
Yeah,
splits at Virginia kind of speak for themselves. Like he was basically a 50-40-90 guy. Like that shot is just going to come around. Like he's a good offensive rebounder. Like I love when he crashes the glass. Like he's got some nice like putback dunk jump or ups. And I still am pretty optimistic about him and his ability to defend at the NBA level. So yeah, I agree that we've seen him, just like figure out like, oh, how can I impact the game other than my shooting? And I think over the past month too, what I've seen from him is he's taken the threes even when I don't think he's in like the best rhythm.
yeah,
Like even when he's not like, oh, I'm really feeling it, like he's still taking them when they're open and when they're there. And I think that's really important. Like he's just got to let them fly. I mean, this team just doesn't really have many shooters. I mean, I think they're like, I don't know, something like 27th in 3-point percentage. Like it's an area that I think they still need to improve. So He's just got to let it fly anytime he has daylight really from three. And I think he's done a better job of just like staying confident and letting it go. And it's kind of funny with Kenny Murphy, his father too. Like I talked to them before the season, and like how Ja said like my dad was my first hater.
Bro.
Yeah, like I'm not saying like it's like that. Like Trey never said anything
Oh,
like
it's
that.
like that.
Yeah.
It's like that.
I would
I
say there was a
promise you, it's
similar
like that.
dynamic. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, it may not be to that. It may not be to that degree, but yes, like that's a great comparison because that's exactly what it's like. And but it's for the better. It's for the better, and you can tell like Trey actually responds well to it.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, like he told me a story. His father coaches AAU team. I believe they're like the Durham Hurricanes, and Trey wasn't a starter for a couple of years, and he basically got in the starting lineup. I think going into ninth grade because a kid who was in the starting lineup forgot to turn in his homework, and his parents were like, "Well, you're out of this tournament, or whatever." So it's kind of like, it wasn't even like he fought his way onto the starting lineup on his dad's AAU team. Like he just got in there, and when he was in there, he never let it go. But you're right. I think he has pretty much had to work for everything. I think he was like 6'4", 6'5" at the start of college. Like he wasn't nearly as big as he is now, even as recently as like 3 years ago. So he's kind of another one of those guys who's a late bloomer who we've seen the Pelicans front office take chances on. Jackson Hayes is kind of like a guy like that, like a late growth spurt. And I think it's going to take, it's taken a couple of years for Jackson to start to deliver on some of this potential. And I think you could say some similar things about Trey, although we've seen it a little earlier with him than Jax.
No, I mean and look, I mean everything. What's interesting is that I think we all had these expectations for Trey, and you just I guess in the process you get to watch Herb right away just be NBA ready.
Yeah.
You
And Herb's,
you
it's not
watch
fair because Herb's like a 35-year-old man.
Yeah, not
Yeah.
not like he is, like literally. I mean, it just I agree. Jose Alvarado, we watched him come in undrafted, and you could see right away where he fit the team, and it was the same. You could see that similarly with Trey. It, it was difficult for like his route just had to be different. It had to be different, and it had to be more uphill. But I think the beauty in that is that I think he easily has the most upside, right? As good as Herb has been, I think that Trey's upside is higher than that, and it should be. Um, there's some things he's going to have to work on in regards to his body, and I see a question. Shout out to CJ, who asked, would you want Trey to bulk up, and play the small ball five with Zion? Probably not. I mean, I think I envision you getting able to see with a lineup like that, Herb play small ball five. But sure, I mean Trey definitely he still has to work on his body, and I think with his rebounding ability, and one of the things I think that this team missed when Josh Hart left was just not just someone who could help on the boards, but like an aggressive rebounder. Like you hear all of Trey's rebounds every time, whether it's defensive, whether it's offensive. Every time he goes and gets the basketball, it's at the highest point and it's loud, right? That's immediately where he's been able to make an impact outside of his shooting, outside of his improvements defensively. So when you look at a guy who, as he continues, he's very, very smart, and I think he learns quickly. Um, Once he's able to have another year to work on his frame, work on his strength, and continue to work on some of the other things with his game, dribbling, what he does off closeouts. The athleticism is surprising people, but you watch his tape in college, he was getting up there then, so you have that aspect as well. Um, the mindset, the demeanor, all of it's there. you know, I just think his ceiling is a lot higher than people realize. And even if you haven't gotten a chance to see a full year of it, like we're gonna look back, I think, years from now and say like this period where we were unsure about if he was going to be in the G League, if he was going to be a part of a trade package, if he was going to be a part of this team's future. I think is going to be probably one of the better things that happened to him.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, he's an effortless leaper. Like I'm not going to say I watched like a ton of Virginia games last year, but I definitely saw that at Summer League. Like it was clear when you were watching him get up in person. It's like, man, like it doesn't take a lot for him to get really high up there and like do some crazy dunks, and like he doesn't even really break a sweat. So I agree, man. All of that is really really intriguing, and I think I would agree with you. Like who has the highest ceiling among this rookie class? I still think I would go with him. I mean, Herb, that that floor is just really high because of how good he is in the defensive end. But like, realistically, how much more can Herb improve as an outside shooter? I mean, yeah, I mean, still think he could, but like, I think he's most of the way there already. And man, yeah, Trey's definitely still got, I think, a long, long way to go. And the interesting thing about him too is like when you talk to him, it's very clear he's an extremely smart kid. Like I'm not saying this to knock either. I don't know that he's not as mature as Herb and who is, among NBA rookies, but like
Herb's a robot, man.
yeah,
Like,
yeah, like he's very yeah, he's just still got some stuff to learn, but he's very smart and engaging and funny, and you could just tell when you talk to him. So I like all that. It's really encouraging.
yeah. I mean, you've mentioned to me, in private about how good he is with the media, right? That comment even about him being at the barbershop was, I mean, it's probably one of my favorite post game interview um, comments or quotes from the year. It's just, but that's just who he naturally is, right? I
Yeah,
mean, we see how him and Devontae play around in regards to food and
dude, do not forget the sauce on the team plane, okay?
Jesus Christ, I didn't know Kane. First of all, let me say something. Kane sauce isn't that great for it to be like that kind of situation. I'm just gonna say that. You know what I mean? I know people don't want to hear my food takes. It is what it is. Kane sauce ain't that great for y'all to even be doing that, but that's okay. No, that's okay. Shout out to Cane's. It's
Chick
all
Fil A
right.
sauce is that good though, I think.
I'm with that. It's so good they sell it out of a bottle at stores.
Yeah, I haven't seen it in the bottle down here, but that's my preferred sauce every time I'm at Chick Fil A. I gotta get two of them. I gotta get two.
Agreed. Agreed.
So we kind of just got into this with Trey, and like I think I'm more on the side of I'm okay with Willie bringing him along slowly and the rationale behind that, and like really making him earn it. I mean, I can see the other side of it too. Um, but like we've got a full regular season's uh, worth of games now. If you had to just give Willie a grade, what would you go with and why?
For the full year,
Yeah, the full regular season.
uh, man, probably like a B. Because you look at some of the teams that they passed up in the Western Conference. I think some of them, you could argue when you consider the talent that's been available because of injury and other things, and just overall team. When I say team chemistry, I mean like how long that these guys have been playing together on the floor as a team. You could argue that there are other teams that they surpassed from a consistency and a talent perspective that had the Pelicans beat, and none of them had a 1-15, or I'm sorry, 1-12 start, a 3-16 start to have to overcome. So when you consider first time head coach, who day one had his best player, his superstar talent isn't playing a minute, and just some of the flaws that the team had to overcome. Man, I think even being here after that start, when you haven't been in a position like that as the guy, as the head coach, in regards to all of these other players that you have to put in the right situations, you're learning as you go along as well. I think that aspect alone, um, by itself, is deserves him to be at least a B. But I think the reason it's not, you can't give him a perfect grade because we did see, which is 100% fair, we saw rookie head coach struggles, and we still see it. But there are aspects behind that we don't that some of us don't know, that we won't end up knowing until maybe after the year, or maybe you never find out. But the Garrett Temple situation, the Thomas Satoransky situation, and now you're looking at you're talking about Devontae Graham. There are some things that there are some question marks. in regards to maybe why um, these guys aren't playing or haven't been playing. And then you talk about the Trey Murphy situation. There's a lot of the rotations and that aspect of things. It's probably why you can't say it's perfect, because it felt like Willie sometimes made things a little bit more difficult than it had to be. But he had to hit a wall somewhere. He had to end up struggle from some perspective. And I think that's pretty much it. But when you look at the totality of it, everything that was, that he had to overcome with a roster that still has, while it has natural talent, there were a lot of developments that needed to come forward. And even if he was late to the bus in regards to making some of them happen and putting these guys in the best situations, he eventually did them. So, B plus, B minus. I don't care where you end up grading it there, but definitely more good than bad. I don't know if there is many other coaches that could have been in that situation to rally his team to be in this position that they're in come Wednesday.
Josh the Pels fan says B plus. I think that's fair. That's the one I've got written down in my little outline here. I think if there is a criticism of a good year from Willie is that he was sometimes slow to adapt, and I think we saw that mostly in the Garrett Temple situation. Like
Yeah,
it was pretty clear. Like, okay, look, you just had to try something else, and he continued to play big minutes, and that probably cost the Pelicans a few wins, but
right.
overall, I mean, I think it was an excellent first year from him, and I do think that it took a special type of person just not to allow the noise and the negativity get to you early on. Because when I go back to July, the month he was hired, and in the next few months, man, there was a lot of negative noise surrounding the Pelicans. I think a lot of which was justified. But I even you were hearing a lot of relocation talk and stuff like that around the league, and I mean that was not justified. So it's hard to just mentally block that out and stay positive and just stay the course. And I think Willie is very uniquely suited to remain positive, and he's a guy who has the blinders on kind of in a good way and is able to just focus on his goal. So I think there weren't many people who could have just weathered that storm and got them back on track. And I give him a lot of credit for that. And the other thing I'll say too is tactically, I think he had a lot of the right ideas. And Josh Hart, for example, him and Josh Hart sat down, before the season, whatever, and they just talked about his role. And Josh was like, yeah, I did not like being a 3-and-D guy. I think I can handle the ball. I think I showed that at Villanova. And Willie was like, you're right, man. You do have that in your game. And that was a huge change for the Pelicans. And
Yeah,
the season started to turn around when Willie put Josh in the starting lineup around Thanksgiving alongside Devontae Graham, alongside Herb, and JV. It's easy to kind of forget now, but I think playing for Willie unlocked part of Josh's game that we really hadn't seen at the NBA level so far, and it raised his trade value to the point where he was kind of the main guy in a trade for CJ McCollum, which is it's kind of crazy to think about. I don't think that happens last year. Understand Van Gundy and the version of Josh we saw. You're not including Josh as the centerpiece in a trade for CJ McCollum. So I give Willie a lot of credit there, and I give him credit too with BI. I think BI was just a better overall player. Him and Willie are definitely on the same page. That was not the case with Stan. I think the playing a tick faster thing has unlocked a lot of BI's games too, and Willie just encouraged him to trust his teammates. So I do give him a lot of credit in both those things.
yeah, and I think, I mean, listen, man, NBA seasons, they're not MLB seasons, but they're long as hell, man. So we forget. I mean, so like you said, we forget how at one point Willie allowed Devontae to do a lot of point guard things. And then when the offense wasn't necessarily clicking in the way that it should have been, all right, when Bi, you're basically playing point guard, right? So we saw that trust, and that allows him to make that development. We talked about Josh Hart, and look, at the end of the day, there's nothing he could do to control the way Thomas Satoransky played, the way Garrett Temple played. And maybe, in his mind, he's been in that position as a veteran in this league, and a veteran guard specifically. the hope that these guys are gonna find a way to put it together, but it just didn't. It didn't work. And I think that the irritation with some of that is that you feel like maybe you gain a couple games if you pull the plug on, so to speak, on Temple or Sadaransky, or a little bit earlier. Or, and I don't know how much we'll have in this conversation about Devontae Graham at some point. But just he's towing a line between his, because Willie, I think Willie's best attribute is his demeanor, or his best attributes are his demeanor and his ability to communicate with each player. So I think part of him could be battling with the fact that you know I owe it to these guys to let them be able to play themselves out of a slump, even when it's at its ugliest. So it's just, I think overall it's something that he's going to have to work through. But we also have to point at some of the positives that we saw him put together earlier in the year. The way that he used Bi, some of the ways he used Jonas when Jonas was, a little bit more fresher. And there's little things throughout games that if we give him, if we give him flack for, we got to give him credit for, right? That Laker game, the first Laker game in New Orleans, he tried to run Billy Hernan Gomez out there because he had a good game the game before, and then you realize early, man, it's just not going to work. It's not going to work against this matchup. Billy can't play out here, and then you don't see him again, right? And then I don't believe that you end up seeing him in the last game in Los Angeles. So game to game, you kind of, but the Sacramento game, you knew it was right for Billy to be out there, and he has a really good game. So I mean, same with Portland. I think he's learning that balance between his communication, his demeanor, and what that means to the rotation. And that may mean like, yo, you might be a straight up, you might be straight up with these guys, but at the end of the day, if they're not performing and you have someone else that maybe puts you in a better situation, you have to end up making it, because in these playoff type games, you're going to get Greg Popovich. And if you get out of that, you're going to get your old head coach and Monty Williams. These guys have been through these positions and these situations. You got to adapt on the fly. So we'll see how that happens. But I mean, overall, to me, it's a B. And that's saying a lot, man, because this season, I mean, did you see them being in this spot at the end of the year, the way it started?
No, no. I mean, I thought, no, I didn't see them making a tournament appearance of the play-in tournament. And like if you just look at the East versus the West standings, like we got to be fair. Like the West was worse than the East this year. Like if you put up this record in the East, you wouldn't have made it. The Pelicans and the Knicks got identical records, but like they're 32 in 28 in their last 60 games. Like I didn't see that type of turnaround with no Zion and Bi missing a bunch of games. Like that's a legitimate accomplishment. We got a question in the chat here. Oh man, I'm sorry if I mispronounce this. Vinicius Rodriguez. Do you guys think Willie will utilize Zion a different way than we last saw from him, considering how improved the supporting cast is? I'm taking this to mean, do you think Willie will utilize him kind of in, that primary, secondary ball handler role we saw last season, kind of the point Zion thing when the Pelicans offense got humming under Stan a little bit? I don't know. I think that's a really interesting question. I mean, I know that like this roster was built in the offseason to highlight that. Like I know the Pelicans coming into the season wanted to lean into that concept. So that would suggest to me that like we'll continue to see those things next year, I think.
I mean, I'm with you. I think that I think the Josh Hart comparison is what that you spoke about earlier is kind of perfect for this discussion. He's going to give you the opportunity to play the way that you want to play basketball, to play the way that you fit most comfortable in. And I think it's clear that Zion wants the ball in his hands. Now, how he manages that, the lineups that he puts him in going forward, it's going to be interesting. I don't know if the usage will necessarily be that high because it won't have to be,
Because they had
right?
CJ.
I mean, it just simply won't have to be, especially with the improvements that Bi has made. But yeah, man, I mean, I think you'll definitely still see a lot of point Zion because that's what he's comfortable with. That's what he wants to do. And I mean, look, like when the ball is at Zion's hands at the top of the key or anywhere, all five players are staring at him. We saw so many different possessions of that, to where the whole paint collapses around Zion. It's like an ant pile, right? I mean, they all collapse around Zion. It's going to open up so much for others. So you have to use him that way. But I don't think it's going to be needed. You're probably talking about something that's going to be more of a luxury, a utility than just something that you have to rely on necessarily. But I mean, we'll see. But I don't think Willie's gonna really stand in front of what any. He's gonna give everybody an opportunity, or at least from what I've seen, to kind of prove that they are who they believe they are. And then once it's not the case, changes have to be made.
Yeah, he's gonna solicit players' input, and like that's gonna be a part of the decision making process. And like Zion loves to play this way. Like that was one thing he made clear last year. Like that was the way he grew up. Like put the ball in my hands and I'll play make and let me cook. And by the way, I think that's the case with a lot of NBA players because they're just the best player in whatever team they're on. So it makes sense to give the best player the ball and like let the offense flow through him. So I'm kind of with you. We see it, but it's not to the degree that we saw it under Stan Van Gundy. Part of which is because like it was such a necessity to understand because like their starting guards were Lonzo, who is excellent like maestro in transition, but like not a guy who's just like making plays for a bunch of other people in the half court, and then Eric Bledsoe was just basically a fire hydrant last year. We shouldn't. I don't think we need to talk about that
This
anymore.
year, this year too.
I tried to erase that from my memory altogether. Um, this last part, just wanted to talk a little bit more about Z. So the latest I'm hearing basically is, he got ruled out for game number 82 this morning, but based on what I've heard, the conversations I've had over the past few days, I think it remains pretty unlikely that we see him, during these play-in tournament games. I think if the Pelicans were able to win both and get to a first-round series against the Phoenix Suns, I think there's a chance. But I think, the most likely scenario, based on conversations I've had in the past few days, is that, we see Zion suit up in a game for the Pelicans again and at the start of next season. But I feel like what we talked about last week was pretty spot on. Like I think we got the dynamic right. Like Zion wants to play, he wants to get back on the court. His stepfather Lee pretty much confirmed that in an interview with Jordy Culotta this week. And the team's like, you just got to check all these boxes. But I think that's pretty much the dynamic here. And I think things are trending in the right direction. But I don't think there's a good chance that we see Zion again this season.
So let me ask you, Christian, because I think that there's a disconnect, right, between this situation, what's been put out there, and what people how people feel the organization is handling this. Like I think you and I talked about it. Like the days of them giving timetables on his return are pretty much dead, right? Because it's pretty much blown up in their face every single time. But what I want to ask you is like, how much about where he's at right now for someone who desperately wants to play and be a part of it, just play basketball again, right? Just hoop. How much about this situation and his return is about conditioning? How much of it is about weight? What do those two things play in the fact that and why you haven't seen him or you may not end up seeing him if from what you know?
Yeah, I think those are significant parts of it. Like for the past week, he's been playing in what Willie's called controlled scrimmages. Basically that means he's playing in these stay fit games. Like a couple hours before tip off, the player development coaches, guys like Corey Brewer and guys like that, will play in kind of 4-on-4, 5-on-5 full court games with some of the players. It's oftentimes some of the end of bench guys, and Zion has been playing in, a couple of those games, which I think is a good sign, obviously, right? If he's getting up and doing full court 4-on-4, 5-on-5. The word is like he's looked pretty good. He still, I think, has got to get in better shape. But as far as like him being back in the court, I think it's just to like they want to be as certain as they can that foot is not going to re-break. They're just slowly ramping him up and like just seeing like, hey, is there any soreness? How's it feeling? Okay, good. We'll get you to the next step. But if you think back to a couple of months ago, like Zion did all of this. Like he got to the point where he's going to go through a practice in December, which would have been, if you get through a couple practices, you're back out there. He began experiencing soreness in the right foot, which is
Right.
when they scaled them back. So I think all of this is just like, we just need to be certain that this doesn't happen again. You know, like it's okay if we're patient and cautious this time, as long as you're fine by the start of next season, really, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I mean it's such an interesting situation, man, because I think we all can envision multiple ways in which he can help the team, and even if it's in a limited spot, but there's so many different other elements that are in play here, right? Because if you play him, um, he's obviously going to be limited. Are you going back to playing burst, right? Which he hated. He absolutely hated. Then there's the other side of it. If it's simply a weight, if it's a conditioning type of situation, I mean, we've seen them put him in games, whether it's the first game he played, the first regular season game he played against the Spurs a few years ago, or those bubble games later on in that year. He was huffing and puffing up and down the floor, right? But he's one of those guys that's just, he's one of the most unique talents that we've ever seen. Where even if he's not in shape, he can be very, very dominant. Now, then there's a side of it, how much of him being in whatever shape that, just cardiovascular shape plays into him getting hurt. There's so many different things that you throw around. But I think what you just mentioned is probably the biggest part of this, if we're being honest. Him getting so close to returning in December and then experiencing soreness pretty much at the end of this process has to be running through their minds. To where we're at a point to where people are expecting him. People wondering, will he play this game? Will he play this game? You know, people, you hear the reports and the rumors. Stepdad says, he thinks that he's going to play. You hear what the guys from Baton Rouge end up saying about saying that he will play basketball this week. Um, it just feels as if at this point it has to be in the back of their minds, like, man, we would hate for that soreness to come with him actually playing and maybe that turning into him, like you said, re-breaking the foot or whatever the case may be. So it's so many different, I think, things that are at play here. And it's just hard to see through, which kind of makes it frustrating, to be in this situation because that you're going to be watching these games. Maybe not the Spurs game if you get through it, but for sure if you're playing Minnesota and LA, like, damn, God, would you like to see Zion right now?
Before we get out of here, Josh the Pels fan says, who do y'all think the Pelicans should draft at number 8 or higher? I'm really high on Shaden Sharp. If they stay at 8, which is where that Lakers are locked into, I don't know. I really haven't done the research. I haven't asked around enough on that, like guys that could be in that range. But I think I do have a little bit of insight on if the Pelicans are able to vault into the top 4. They've got a 26% chance of landing a top 4 pick. If they're at near the top of the draft, I think they'd be pretty interested in Jabari Smith. Just because they feel like the shot making ability at that size would be a pretty seamless fit on this roster. I mean, I've just heard there's a lot of fans here in this front office who I think they like Jabari Smith a lot. If improbably they make that leap, I think that's a guy that would be really, really interested in, and I would love to see that, but it's not the most likely scenario.
I mean, look, man, I think I've been of the mindset to where if you don't end up in the top 4, I'm looking to trade it. To be honest, I'm more of a thinking that the top 4, that particular area, if has some really good talent, just overall. And I'm not concerned about where they necessarily fit because for me, I don't think any of them are like going to be starting. So you get a chance to get a premier talent that was scheduled, or in most situations, circumstances are scheduled to have to be a part of a rebuilding situation or be a part of a, kind of face of the franchise type spot. And that would be the complete opposite drafted to the Pelicans. And we know, we see it all the time how much circumstance matters for players. So you get a chance to get a supreme talent, whether it's Ivy, whether it's whether you're talking Chet, whether you're talking Paolo, whether you're talking Jabari Smith. Did I say Ivy already? Um,
You love
what
Ivy.
are you talking? Man, yes, yes. Yeah, man. So I mean, any of those guys, they're going to be going to a completely different circumstance, to where all they got to do is worry about going out there and hoop. So who fits best for where this roster is situated by that time, or where the vision is to be decided. But I probably, if you're not in the top four, I'd be interested in maybe packaging it to improve the team elsewhere. Maybe I know other there are names that a lot of fans end up liking if you do keep the pick, and we know how important it is to nail those situations and have cost control, rookies, or cost control draft picks. They have high upside when you are a small market. You definitely love to see it that way. But I think I'm being greedy, Christian, because I want one of those guys at the top four. But I got to do a lot of watching to get to start till we start talking about Sharp and some of the other guys, man.
Yeah, I just don't know enough about like those guys. The back half of the top 10. But cool, man. This was really fun. I think I'm sorry about the technical difficulty. I'm getting better. I'm learning, but I think this is going to be a really fun week, man. I just can't wait to see what the atmosphere is like on Wednesday, and I think the Rusty Nail, man. It's going to be lit.
Dog, I just, man, the Rusty Nail. We gotta do better with these names, man. I just even telling people, hey, man, we gonna be at the Rusty Nail. Just don't sound. It sound kind of SpongeBob-ish, man. You know what I'm saying? It just a little bit,
It'll be good,
but
man. It'll be good.
I haven't been there, so it's not necessarily fair. But yeah, it's gonna be a good time, especially the pregame. And if they win, oh my god, it would be crazy. So, and I'm sure a lot of you that pull up will be as well. So, man, like more news about that will be put out, flyers and all type of stuff, out there. Maybe bad photoshops with my face on it again, and we'll see how it goes. But yeah, man, it's gonna be a crazy week for sure.
Do you need me to schedule you a wake up call for like 4 a.m. Thursday?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, 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 yes. Please,
All right, man. Hey, don't miss that flight, and can't wait to see you in person this week.
absolutely, man, absolutely. So, yeah, yeah, we definitely. As long as you ain't up at 1 o'clock in the morning having to do recaps, man. At some point, man, pull up. We gonna parlay, chop it up. So, yeah, man, I see you when I
All right, man.
pop in.
I'll be there after I get done, but all right, guys. Appreciate y'all for tuning in.
All right, y'all.